Are you a working professional but struggling to balance the workload of your career, family, obligations, and preparing for your financial future? If so, this podcast is for you. You've spent years learning your craft, and now it's time to focus on your financial future. This podcast will teach you what you need to retire wealthy and happy. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Retire Wealthy and Happy podcast. We created this podcast to provide financial tips and tricks to help you build up your passive income and also provide methods that you can use to protect your wealth so that you can plan a better future for yourself and your family. We're grateful to have this podcast sponsored by Monument Real Estate Capital. Monument Real Estate Capital, helping you retire 10 years early through real estate investments.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Retire Wealthy and Happy podcast. Today we have Amy Cook, who is the founder of Maven Lane Financial Group. How are you doing today, Amy?
I'm good, Roger. How are you?
Doing good. So you've got about 20 years in the financial, personal, and financial advisory section. Tell us about what you've done and what you do.
So I'm a financial planner advisor. I work with people at all stages, really, just getting started, accumulating, getting ready for retirement, people who want to retire early, people who never want to retire. What I do is kind of take a macro look and the entire picture and see where we can do better and improve, on what clients are already doing, just to make their situation better and to achieve their goals and ensure that they're on track.
That's awesome. You wrote a book that teaches financial narrative and the story version. Can you tell us what a financial narrative is?
Yeah, so I wrote Your Money Narrative, which is a group of kind of fictional money stories that hopefully are relatable dilemmas that a lot of people go through. Money narratives are really just kind of the stories that we are telling ourselves that maybe we don't know we're telling ourselves, that we carry through our adult lives and affect the decisions that we make. So they could be things that are, instilled in us at a very young age, and we're making decisions based on those things. Could be family, parents, circumstances, situations that have happened. And, it's a good idea to, look at those as we kind of make decisions. Maybe some things aren't working out and see if they're serving us.
I like to think of that as being something where somebody might say, I can't afford this, whereas somebody with a good financial narrative would say, how can I afford this? And a lot of that comes down to mindset. How do you teach a story that tells somebody what to do to change their financial narrative?
I don't know that I really teach a story. I've just noticed kind of consistencies throughout the years of stories that, kind of surface over and over, I guess you could say, and my own as well. And I think that just kind of questioning it or subtly questioning that story and what's going on, and if there might be other possibilities is a start. Like I said, often we don't even know that we're telling ourselves the story. So it's hard to, call out something that you see if there's, if the person doesn't realize that they're telling themselves a story. Just fine by kind of illustrating options and saying, hey, this might not be the case, and there's, alternatives here that's, it can start the ball rolling to changing it.
Can you give me an example of a bad financial narrative?
Well, I think that a lot of narratives are based on fear. So you might have, let me think of a negative narrative. Well, have you ever heard someone talk about, the stock market dropping to zero? I'm afraid that I'm going to lose all of my money. And that's a really, really strong statement. And it's not to say that it's impossible, but if that were to happen, it would mean that every single company is bankrupt. We've got far bigger problems if that happens. So a lot of times fear will make us go like from, 0 to 100 versus looking at the real true risk, which is somewhere in between.
For sure. I hear that most in real estate, and it's a lot of people saying, "Oh, it's impossible to buy a house right now." And I'm always contrarian to that, and it's like, well, the best way to do it right now is to house hack and buy something that can also produce, part of your mortgage or more with a mother-in-law apartment or a duplex. Or right now there's a special loan with Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae that you can buy a fourplex and get a great loan and be able to do it. And the financial narrative is I can do it by cheating the system and house hacking, as opposed to, oh, there's no way I can afford a house. And it's just hard to tell people that stuff.
I mean, I love that. I talk about the multi units all the time, as far as if it's here in the Bay Area, real estate can get pretty up there. And a lot of times the multi units are above that threshold. But I think it's a fantastic, opportunity.
For sure. How does sharing your financial narrative help boost your family's financial health?
Well, I think kind of sharing what, as you build an awareness of things that you might see going on in your own financial picture, I think it can really help your kids, your partner, people you work with by saying, hey, I was really worried about this. And I thought, well, should I really be so worried about this? And then it can open up the door to, maybe other people thinking about their own narratives and sharing their stories.
For sure. And a lot of times you can get somebody's attention a lot better by saying the story as opposed to quote unquote, this is what you need to do.
Hmm.
I think my favorite story is when I started out, I was 22 years old and now I'm 51, so almost 30 years ago. And I was driving around cleaning carpets, and it was a dumb job, just covered in cat fur and chemicals. And I ran into a person that was like, "Yeah, I just made $40,000 and thought it'd be a nice gesture to have the carpets cleaned." And that's like my livelihood. And I'm making $30,000 a year going around doing this. And it would take me over a year to earn that much money. So then I
Hmm.
bought a house without any knowledge of house flipping or anything like that, and was broke, but owned a house. And so I had to learn how to do everything myself because I couldn't afford the contractors and everything else. So I learned how to do construction. And then, the rest they say is history, and got into construction. And now I'm more of like the construction side of all the different financial things that I'm doing, because I have knowledge of the, way to do stuff and how to talk about it and how to vet and hire contractors and contracts and stuff like that. And so that's my financial narrative. But then trying to teach that is a lot harder because a lot of times people won't accept the story, even though they have great experience in construction or, an asset like me that can teach them how to do investing, because they just have a fear problem or something else. So
Hmm.
I hit that button, 18 on the jukebox that is here's how I got started, and try to teach through that a lot.
Well, yeah, and it's like anything else, right? I'm sure once you did it, your comfort zone increased over time. And a lot of times it's just getting started with something that's the hardest part.
And that's for sure. How do you help people overcome their fear and get started investing and getting started towards their retirement and financial future?
Well, I mean, I think it depends on the stage, or the earlier the better, as everyone knows. If someone comes to me and they want to retire next year, we don't have a lot of time to make a ton of changes. And it's like, you're either in a good position to do so or not. But when there's, 10 years, now we've got some time to make some changes. And, I think with financial planning, because there's a lot of financial planners who just do the investments, and, I do that part of things, but I think the financial planning is so important because it illustrates the gaps. Like, here's where you want to be, here's where you are. And you can see very clearly, what's not working and what needs to change. And that can be very motivating.
I remember a line from the preview of your book that was, nobody gets rich on a salary. Can you expound on that?
So that wasn't my line. That was David Meerman Scott, who wrote the foreword. And he was telling a story about a teacher that he had in high school, and how that really, imprinted on him as far as, his financial decisions and managing money. Because it's really not, well, first of all, I mean, with income in and of itself, you can make millions of dollars a year and spend all of it every year. And that's not really where you're building wealth. It's not what you make, it's what you save, what you invest. Kind of age old advice, I guess.
Yeah, I've heard that from a couple of different people. The Richest Man in Babylon is a pretty good story, and it narrates how you can save 30% and spend 10% of each of that 30% in three different ways. And the other one would be from Carlton Sheets. That was exactly that line. That's, don't tell me what you make, tell me what you save.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've worked with, people that have, really modest salaries, like teachers who are in great, positions for retirement because they're, on top of their finances. And, it's really not, it's not an income thing always, a lot of times it's just habits and resetting those habits.
Yeah, I've worked around a few teachers that have become millionaires and kind of studied that. It seems like teachers are much more likely than several other professions to be millionaires. And it seems to boil down to, they have that confined time where they're teaching. Maybe it's 9 months a year, and then 3 months that they can go and do something else. And a lot of times that'll be fixing up a rental house and renting it, and then adding one every summer or something like that, times several summers. So I find that very true. I like the idea of saving a percentage. And right now I'm trying to teach multiple people that are mostly my kids how to go about spending and setting their goals. And I think, a good goal would be to save 50%, but how do you set realistic goals for people to save money when their seeming budget is so low? Like if they're going to earn $15 an hour, how do you help them set the goal, and what's a realistic goal or a way of setting goals for them? It's easy to say you need to save 50%, but a lot of times it's hard to figure that out. What can you do with that kind of?
Yeah, I mean, for a kid who's at home with no bills, I mean, absolutely, that's a realistic goal. I mean, it depends really on where it's at. I mean, if they're paying, I mean, the last thing you want to do is go in and say, "Oh, you need to be at 50," because then it's gonna be like, "Well, I'm screwed." So I'm going to continue not doing anything. So I think, part of it is that everybody's different, I mean, you have some people who save too much and then they're afraid to spend any money on themselves or do anything that they enjoy doing. And then you've got other people who aren't saving enough and have no idea where they're going to find the money. So, I mean, I think the key though is to pay yourself first, as I'm sure you've heard, 100 times. But if you do get in that habit of pushing the money out to the non-negotiables at the onset, it's then it's a habit that's set. And if you wait till the end, do all the other things that you want to do and then go, oh, there's not enough left over, then that's when you start kicking the can. So it's really, I think that taking the money off the top to fund your different goals is really important.
For sure. And the problem is often you want to save, and then something exciting comes up like a concert, and those concert tickets just seem to get so expensive that it could ruin just about anybody's budget.
Well, and
As
with kids, it's like if you have, I mean, and a lot of what kids learn, they're learning at home. It's because there isn't a lot around this being taught in school, unfortunately. So, on one hand, like my kids, I was always, kind of lecturing them, like, do you know how much this would cost if you got a job here and we were making X amount of dollars per hour? We take taxes out, and then I was pulling, then they would just like gloss over, So I think a lot of times it's better to hear it from someone else rather than your parents. And then some parents, obviously they, their own financial habits aren't great, so they're not really, in a position to teach, as far as savings and things like that and investing.
it's very true. I have one friend that seems like her daughter is about 20, and I think she's living on 35% of her income, living with mom and saving a huge portion. And then all the other stories that I can think of are, you know, you get a check, spend it all, rinse and repeat, which is
Mhm.
really sad and hard to understand. I wish I could teach.
Personally, and I think that's more stressful, like it's much more stressful to not have a cushion, to not have an emergency fund, to not know what you're going to do if you need new tires on your car or something happens with the house, than to just suck it up and, look at it and put some different habits in place.
Absolutely. I think there should be a rainy day fund that everybody has that covers those, basic things that come up, whether it's a house and you know that you're going to need a roof or a water heater, or, something like that, or a car and you're going to need tires or whatever. And knowing what is going to be there and at least planning for the majority of the things that can happen so you're prepared.
Agreed. Agreed.
We're seeing a lot of that in real estate now, and interest rates are going up and insurance just seems to go higher because of other states' misfortune than the states that we invest in.
Hmm.
And so we're all paying the price. And then, not necessarily reaping the rewards because the insurance money is going to other problems and other places. And
Hmm.
it's pretty
Yeah,
frustrating, I
insurance
think.
is crazy right now. I mean, in California too, with all of the fires, I mean, a lot of people are getting their policies canceled, and some of the carriers are kind of pulling out temporarily. So it's been a little, and that's another, like with those kind of costs, like if what it is, like homeowners insurance and property taxes, like I'm a fan of keeping a literal separate account for that. So if you pay it, once a year or twice a year versus every month, just kind of putting that money aside so that when it's due, you just pull it out of that account.
Very true. And a lot of mortgage companies just force that issue by escrowing that money every month.
And
And
for some people, they need that, to impound it. I mean, I prefer to keep it separate, but I also think that there's, if the habits aren't there yet, then you got to kind of know yourself and do, until you're as you're resetting some of those things, do what works best.
for sure. And we do that sometimes as a necessity and sometimes as a smart business plan, and seems to work out better when you've got it planned, and you know stresses you out a little bit more to go over that month by month and wonder if it is going to cover the actual expense,
Hmm.
or just get the bill and then suddenly scramble, and then it's even higher stress, but it's all at once.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us about your money story?
Yeah. So, I mean, as I have worked in this business for 15 years and financial services for longer, one of the things that I realized over the years and working with clients was just looking at my own stories. And so that's kind of where the interest in all of this started. Um, I've been blessed to be in a business where I get to talk to so many other people about kind of what they have going on. And as I listen to other people's stories, I'm looking at my own stories, and I've been making changes all along. But early on in my life, I formed, some money narratives, and I had a lot of fear around money. And so my solution to, you know, financial problems was that it was more money. My parents lost their house, or our family home, when I was 7. And, I didn't know what was going on other than just the stress in the house and seeing my dad so stressed out, and just the fear around that. And so in my little head, it was like, well, I don't, this is a money problem, and it was a money problem. But the problem is I didn't know anything else about the situation other than just money would solve the problem. But I didn't know how much, you know, was it $1,000, $1,000,000? I mean, what would solve this problem? So I then just, kind of turned work into the solution, and work more, make more, work more, make more. And then that's a spiral in and of itself. And, in a lot of ways, it served me, and, I've built a great business and all of that. But just looking at the core of it, it really wasn't about the money per se. It was not wanting to see people that I loved stressed out, and the security of losing our house. And I didn't, definitely didn't want to be in that position. But the balance is realizing that there was more to it than just the money itself.
So at age 7, you watched your parents go through a big hardship.
Hmm.
How old do you think you were when you really understood what had happened?
Like last year, just kidding. I I didn't even connect that fear, and especially around, like, I'm super, my house and having like that security solid spot is super important to me. Um, I started kind of diving into this stuff maybe about 10 years ago. And like, I mean, it's a work in progress. Like, I'll still kind of look at stuff sometimes and go, Amy, what is that about? Like, or, it's hard to name something specific, but once you start becoming aware of kind of things that you tell yourself that are just not necessarily, based in any kind of like research or facts, and you just kind of have a feeling or an emotion around something, or a guilt about, money being spent on certain things or certain areas. I mean, they're all typically rooted somewhere, so just it's a constant, evolving process of just looking at that stuff and kind of tweaking things, and challenging the stories that you tell yourself.
For sure. What 3 pieces of advice, if you could only tell somebody 3 things and they couldn't ask you any follow-up questions, what would your top 3 pieces of financial advice be?
Face the music, and don't ignore what's going on, because it will only get worse. you know Number 2, it's probably not nearly as bad as you think it is. If you think that, situation is dire, and there's always solutions to change it. And number three would be, it's not a sprint, it's kind of, it's the tortoise and the hare, it's the slow and steady and the habits that create the change and the progress over time. But it's not an overnight, not an overnight win. It's a lot of small wins.
For sure. I see a lot of people that have the kind of mindset that is, oh, if only I could win the lottery. And 70%, it's like a known fact, 70% of people that win the lottery, no matter how much it is, go broke within a couple of years. It's amazing. I think the idea of going, we don't have the lottery at all here in Utah, but we can go to Idaho, Wyoming, or other places fairly easily, within an hour and small change from Salt Lake City, and go buy lottery tickets. And I don't think lottery tickets are a good idea. So don't take this as financial advice to go spend money on lottery tickets. But I think the idea of planning what you would do with that money is actually well worth the, maybe $20 amount. So if you go and spend gas and spend $20 on a lottery ticket or lottery tickets, and think about how you would spend that money and think of, all the different parts of it, I think that's a really good financial practice. So for an example, if you were to win, say, $300 million, you can do the financial planning on that and know that the $300 million thing would be an annuity that just paid you out. The cash equivalent would be 150 million. The taxes would be around 50%, so it'd be 75 million. Then what would you do with that 75 million? And I can do a better job investing that money than taking the annuity and everything else over time, because I can invest it smarter and better. So I would take that money and buy, real estate and stocks, maybe a little cryptocurrency here and there, and move it forward, in a way that I could buy this much amount of real estate, this much amount of stocks, their return would be this amount, and then just apply it to what I actually do have and say, okay, so if I'm going to take, 50% of my income, which is left after taxes, and put it into my investment vehicle, I can do the same thing. And realistically, it's exactly like you said. Rather than having it be the sprint that would be the lottery winnings, have it be the marathon that is the 40 or so years that I'm going to be able to smartly make my income and reinvest the difference.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And the lottery piece is a great example. I mean, when I first started in financial services, I was in the mortgage business. And that's kind of what prompted me to flip over to this side was, I was in the mortgage business before, the bust, the 08 Great Recession, Great Depression / recession. But I noticed that I would, refinance help someone refinance their house. They would pay off all of their credit cards. And then a year later, they were in the same exact spot again. And of course, that was recurring business for me, but it was like, how, we solved the problem. There wasn't any major crisis. Like you didn't lose your job. Everything's so it became very clear that it was habits. And so it's really not about just the amount of money, because people say, oh, if I had $1 million or if I won, $5 million, whatever, I'd be all set. And that's not necessarily true. I mean, I've seen people blow through inheritances like very quickly, money that they'd never had, money that they'd never seen. And then it's just all of a sudden gone. So it's just something to think about, because big chunks of money like inheritances or winning the lottery. Let's say you're that person, there's such an opportunity there, like you said, to really secure your future. And it's a great time to step back and say, hey, let me make sure that I'm doing this right.
I look at that type of spending and I think back the early years of the show Wheel of Fortune, you would get all the money at the end of the round and they'd spin the stage around and you'd get like a minute to spend all the money that you just made on the prize. And so they would say, I'll take the living room set for, $2,000. I'll take the, jet ski for, couple $1,000s or whatever they were back then. And then I'll take the rest in a gift certificate. And so they would spend all the money that they had just earned in like 1 minute. And then there was no money left over for the taxes that they'd obviously pay. And it was just a mindset that was just ridiculous. And they changed that a long time ago. So a lot of people might not even remember what that used to be. But I still see that today in a lot of people's spend plan. And it's like, okay, so I got, $1,000 for my paycheck. And what can I buy with that? And then it's gone. And then they go back to work, and start the whole rigmarole all over from scratch every paycheck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's too much month left over at the end of the paycheck.
Right, exactly. I like to think about in more of a strategy of what can I avoid as opposed to planning. I think it's too impossible with my sporadic paychecks, where I'll get a check for flipping a house to say, okay, I'm going to spend, 70% of it and save 30%. And so I just try to save all of it. And then sometimes it'll get a little crazy because I'll get a big check and then it's like, okay, now all of a sudden I can afford to go out to eat. I can afford to go to the grocery store and spend too much money. And sometimes my financial planning falls apart and in almost a make up for what has happened during the, space of what could be months or, you know, weeks or months. So
I think it's really hard. It's a lot harder for self-employed individuals, from a planning standpoint. I mean, when you've got your paycheck every 2 weeks, you can chop that up and just kind of push it out where it needs to go. And for people that are running businesses, I mean, there's some extra steps that to get more organized, that are necessary. And it can be difficult, but on the onset, and I have a chapter about someone who's self-employed in the book, and I've been self-employed the majority of my life. I mean, so I get it. I find that structuring what you can with a salary to yourself, even if it's just you from employer to employee, and still taking those percentages, putting the tax money aside first and things like that can really help. Because if self-employed people wait until they go to do their taxes, it can feel like you're always catching up and never getting ahead, even if it's not like you're going into debt, but if you're just kind of, tax bills are this, and you're always kind of paying in arrears, it's so much more freeing to get ahead of it.
for sure. And we do a lot of that where it's end of the year. Some people wait until tax day to figure out what their taxes are. A lot of real estate people wait until almost the end of the year and then they try to sneak in the tax savings through cost segregation studies and doing different things that can help them in a scramble as opposed to a salary and a plan.
Mhm. Yeah, real estate's tough. I mean, especially I know when interest rates popped up, there was an adjustment there. I mean, like you've got great years and I'm not talking about the investments real estate side. I'm just talking about, residential. I mean, so it can be really volatile.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of realtors and mortgage people right now that had a good budget and plan in the good years, and now they're scrambling to find that income and side hustle and having to sell off real estate and some of the depreciating assets like cars and boats to keep, their head above water, which is really sad right now.
Well, I saw when I was in the mortgage business, in the early 2000s. I mean, yeah, it was like there's some big living going on, big lifestyles, and then '08 happened, and then people are on their brother's couch and stuff, and I mean it really it's cyclical, and we know that it's cyclical. We know that will happen. It repeats, so you just have to plan for it. Just we have cycles.
Yeah, I think anybody that lived through 2008 has a much different perspective right now, what's going on, as opposed to if they just started 4 years ago and were in the heyday of real estate and you could do just about anything wrong on a real estate investment and somehow make great money because prices were going up so quickly that even if you bought a house to flip that wasn't going to make any money, you could still make 10+% because the value went up just during your ownership of like 6 months.
And
Awesome.
it can bite you on the other side, right? So like with real estate, obviously, I mean, it's being able to weather through the storm. Like the people who made it through those few years, I mean, they're in a great spot now. But if people bought too much, pre '08, and they couldn't, keep those things afloat, that's where things turned into trouble.
For sure. Is there anything else you want to expound on before we maybe go into the final 4 questions?
No, go ahead.
Awesome. Well, guys, it's time for the final 4. This is where we ask the same 4 questions of everybody to get an overview of their business sense and stuff. Question number 1, Amy. What is your favorite business book?
Oh, that's a tough one. I, I mean, there's a lot of good books. I think I like The Millionaire Next Door. I gotta go back to that classic. It's a good one.
That's one of my favorites. And every time I think about that, I think about my old truck that isn't a Ford F-150 that they cite in there, but mine's a 2012 Dodge with 280,000 miles. And although I want a brand new Cadillac Escalade for like $130,000, I get my 0 payment, don't care if it gets another scratch truck, and don't have to worry about making a payment or anything else. So that was truly one of my favorite books. And it was one of those, you start it, and I didn't put it down. I didn't
Mhm.
sleep until I was done with it. So I love that
Yeah.
book. What thing or things bring you happiness?
So I'm a cat person. The kitty cats, my kids sometimes. I've got 2 grown girls. I'm a hobbyist too. I've got a lot of hobbies, and I enjoy that downtime of just kind of working on something that's, where I'm not thinking with my day-to-day brain. But I also just I love to see people that I work with when they do some of the things we talk about, and they hit some wins. There's nothing better than that.
I don't think we'd be true to our podcast if you didn't say something about your hobbies and the motorcycles. Can you? I know we had a little conversation pre-recording, but why don't you tell us a little bit about what you've done with motorcycles?
Well, so motorcycles is not even really like one of my typewriters, or is my big hobby right now. I build dollhouses, and I'm like a massive typewriter collector, and I write for typewriter there is a typewriter magazine that still exists, and I, do some stuff with it. But I do have my childhood first motorcycle, and I wrote about it in the book when my dad taught me how to ride a bicycle. The next day, he taught me how to ride. He gave me my Weisinger, which I called it a YZ50 in the book, but it was a Y. I screwed that one up. It was a Weisinger, and I went out and got another one that's just like it was, with the same little stickers and everything. And it looked so much smaller than I remembered it being. Like, this is like the tiniest little bike you've ever seen. So I do have a couple of motorcycles. We grew up, my brothers, raised, and we grew up going to the desert most weekends, and it was good times.
I love it. I love motorcycles too. Question number 3. What is your favorite way to give back?
So I feel like I like to just give back, as things happen and as life happens. And if there's an opportunity to help out, I think it's a good time to give back. I mean, I have been really involved in the community and different things over the years, which I kind of over involved, and I've pulled back on that a little bit, just because there's, it was like too much of a good thing. And, on top of, running the business and, committing to different boards and stuff, it becomes a lot. But I think that there's a lot going on just wherever your backyard is. And I'm here in the Bay Area, but if there's an opportunity to help somebody out, I think that that's an opportunity to give back. I mean, I'm blessed, and I think that if I need to do more. I always feel that way. Like there's more that we can do. There's more to be done. But if we see something and we just do a little, even if it's a little something, it helps.
Absolutely. And I often get inspired when I go to Tony Robbins events, and he'll say, just so you guys know, a portion of your tuition is going to fund meals for people in need. And every time it'll be an astounding number. Like, this event has paid for, 100,000 meals for the homeless or people in need. And every time I hear that, I think, gosh, it would be so easy to go and do some donations over at the homeless shelter. And I always think, man, I should just block out time to go and do something like that. So
it's such a cool thing to do. I mean, whenever, I do that stuff, I want to do more of it. And I did not know that you were a Tony Robbins guy. I'm a T Robbins girl. We have that in common.
I think a lot of people have that mindset, whether they do or don't like Tony Robbins. They always have that exact same mindset, whether they've, done it or not. Have you done UPW and walked fire?
I've done Date with Destiny. I've done Business Mastery. I've done Life Mastery. I mean, I've done a bunch of his stuff, but I never did that initial one.
I think that was the best event ever. The first time I did it recently back in, I think it was December of 2023. And so walked fire for the second time, but the first time it was truly unleashing the power within, as the UPW stands for.
Yeah.
And I was in a full-on trance and
That's
walked
cool.
across the fire, and it was just one of the coolest events. There was parts of my feet that just felt like they had a tingling, like they had literally been cooked, and I just couldn't feel it during the time of the fire walk because I just blocked out everything. And the event was just life altering, because you just go through all the steps and identify what you're dealing with and everything else. So I do love the Tony Robbins. I want to get to Date with Destiny. I've done Business Mastery and look forward to doing everything else. And it also there was a really funny movie that I watched last night that was Couples Retreat, that was kind of a
I've seen that.
it was kind
It's
of
hilarious. Yeah.
a farce on the Tony Robbins in Fiji, where the couples went with all their different, there was 4 different couples and they all went with their different problems. And in the end, the guy that was like Tony Robbins had actually fixed them all, even though it looked like a complete failure the whole entire movie. So it was really funny.
The great movie.
It is funny. Look, question number 4. What does your future retirement look like?
That's a good question. Probably like I like doing stuff, projects, like my hobbies and stuff. I'll probably be fixing up a house or 2 when I just dive in, do a lot of it myself. When I step out a little more, I don't know if I don't know what full retirement looks like, but over time I'll probably free up and build the team out differently. And I like renovation type of projects.
Yeah, I think that everybody starts out with the idea that they're going to retire. And when you look at it, you don't want to lose your purpose. And so it turns into, what purpose will you redirect into? And stuff like renovations or hobbies get a high priority, along with giving back or charities and stuff that don't have the financial gain, but still have the activity and the purpose.
Right. And really, it's just about having the freedom to do those things and whatever it is that you want to do. I mean, some people want to just travel nonstop, and some people want to garden, and just being able to do it.
Awesome. Where's the best place for people to find you online and social media?
Yeah. So we have a page set up, and I wrote it down. And it's on my, so my book website is yourmoneynarrative.com. I've got a couple of free checklists there. I've got different checklists that sort of correspond to the chapters that help with different stages, and financial stages. But mavenlanefinancialgroup.com is my work website. And then if you do mavenlanefinancialgroup.com/ retire wealthy happy, that's our page. And there's a bunch of cool stuff on there. I've got various financial planning packages you could check out. And if you want to book some time to talk about it, there's a link right on the site there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. We've had Amy Cook on their show today, and we've talked about financial advice and how to get ahead and retire 5 to 10 years earlier. Thanks for being on the show, Amy.
Thank you, Roger. I really appreciate it. It was fun.
And we'll see you guys all on the next podcast.
Hope you got value from this episode. And if you have a minute, then take the time to leave an honest written review for the podcast, because we take those reviews seriously, and it'll help us serve you better on the next episodes. And most importantly, be sure to start taking action so you can control your financial future today.